Trying different lights on here too to see how it goes. Okay, gonna get started. Today I'm gonna be continuing to work on the contacts application. I noticed a little problem here with the get commit ID. I fixed that. It's just I missed the closing parentheses. That's already fixed, and I believe upload. I just haven't refreshed the page. We went through, we added database, we added the API endpoints to allow get, search, get all, save, delete, and put. And we tested a lot of that manually through the console app. Today we are going to work on adding unit tests to the application. This will allow us to validate that things are working the way they should be working, or at least working the way we intend them to work. And that will allow us to do some refactoring to the application and coming up pieces. So let's take a look at the app itself. Make sure I got the right app running. Yes, I do. Two things you might notice if you're on a previous one or following up from the updates that I made, or if you're watching the YouTube video, I commented out this code and just adding comments to it to let us know that we can uncomment them out if we want to validate anything. But this console app that we wrote just basically tested out our business manager layer, aka logic layer in the contact manager. So we want to add tests to this so that we don't have to create a separate application, run it, potentially delete records to and from. So let's go and do that. So typically you go and create what's called a test project. Depending on the version of Visual Studio you have, or Writer, you have different choices. You can also add in additional projects or additional types of stuff or different test project types to it. I'm going to start with some of the out of the box ones. I don't know if we'll get into adding any more, but we'll see. So now we have the add new, and it should look familiar to you. Let's go to the unit test project, and we are going to give it a name to be consistent with everything else. We will start it off with contacts, and then from contacts, typically the way I do it is I name it around the framework that we are testing, or the library. In this case, we're testing the context.logic. So I'm going to do the context.logic and then end it with the word test. And the project directory is going to stay the same. We want everything to be in source. Then you have different types. MS Test is the out-of-the-box legacy testing framework from Microsoft. This has been around forever, and it's still used and still quite valid. xUnit is a open source testing framework that has been around for at least 15 years. It's based off of JUnit, which is a JavaScript one. It's owned by or maintained by the Apache project now. And then xUnit is a relatively newcomer, or at least as new as .NET Core. This spawned off from some engineers that worked on the .NET Core team that wanted to provide a better way of testing. Hey Kev, what's up? You still got to respond to my email, man. A better way to test. So xUnit was born. And we're going to take a quick look at the docs in a second. I'm going to start off with xUnit since we're testing a .NET Core project. Then hit correct, or sorry, create, not correct. Once this is created, let's go back. I went out and started looking at mocking. I've only used mock personally 2 or 3 times. There's another side project I'm working on that I started playing around with it. So I keep the docs open because it's not as familiar to me as it was, although my team has been using it for a good 2 years now. I don't necessarily go into every detail about setting it up and that kind of stuff when I'm doing code reviews. I also pulled up the Microsoft Fakes, which is another library that talks into it of how you can create fake objects and start working to them. Probably not going to cover this one because I have no idea what's involved. Maybe we'll do that on like Monday's thing, or if I get some time over the weekend, we'll do a surprise stream and I'll talk about. Thanks. I know it's in the inbox. That reminds me, I forgot to mute my phone, and I heard it somewhere. It's probably in the back. And then we are going to look at xUnit. xUnit is our base. So let's assume the project is started, and then we'll come back, create a project, and then we will kind of walk through it. So logic test is created. Notice a little red because it's not in version control yet. I'm going to add them all just so I get rid of that annoying red. And then let's go with the unit test. Just like we get a class 1, we are going to rename that. So I'm going to use my writer shortcut. And my typical naming for tests are usually the class that you're testing at the end. So we already have context.logic.test, which is our overall namespace. So we're going to test the contact manager. And I know test is a little redundant, but when you start looking at class names and they're all named the same, it kind of gets a little muddied. So hit next, we'll rename that. And then we have our contact manager.test. I'm not going to explain fact right now. Let's go back to the docs for a sec to get a quick overview. One of the surprising things about the xUnit is it's not documented in a way that, for me, it's at least easier to read. They have some kind of articles to get started, but a lot of it you kind of just figure out if you have some sort of testing experience. Since we are using .NET Core, the documentation says to go through the command line and do this. We're going to do testing from both the writer test runner as well as some command lines. So let's just take a look. We'll open up a new tab and get what the command line looks at. And then let's go see writer since we're going to do it in writer. Essentially it tells you how to get started. This is basically creating the project, which we already did using writer, but I could have just did .NET new class library and then added the testing framework, which is these 3 NuGet packages. How are things going with you, Kevin? I don't have any music set up on my stream yet or any cool graphics. I did play around this weekend with a new bar at the bottom where I don't know where it actually went to. I was messing around with the screen resolution and I think I messed up the size. Yeah, I messed up the size of the screen. The screen should be here and then you should be here and visible. I don't know where it went. There should be a new footer down here or a little bit below that, but for some reason it's not showing up. So let me go and fix this. Hopefully this weekend I get everything lined up and I'm not, oh, look at my face, it's moving. And I'm not constantly playing with it all over the place. Hello, Master Pascal. I don't recognize that name. You're new. Thanks for joining. Panicking with Windows forms. Why? Because no one uses them? Ha, no clue what to do. Funny. What's your question? Maybe we can figure it out together. It's been a while since I did Windows forms anywhere. Not a lot of people actually write stuff with Windows forms. Put your question in. There's at least 2 people in here that can probably help. Meantime, I'm going to keep going forward and work with the testing. So we already get the projects added, the test SDK as well as the xUnit already added, so I don't have to add that. Oh, that's a bummer. What is your assignment supposed to do? And writing our first test case is really what we want to do. So you have these things as facts. If you're using NUnit, they're called test. Other frameworks have different names for it, but we are going to use this one. So we're going to work with the word fact, which is already there. So now we just need to create a test. So let's take a look at the contact manager and close out all this other stuff. Let's start with the first one, which is contact. We want to get at least one contact. So let's do get contact, which is the name of the method we are going to test, and then typically what you're testing. We are testing with a valid ID, and then you add what you're expecting. Now these are just conventions for it. You put down the method you're testing, what you're passing in, and what you're expecting back. And that's only so when you're seeing your test cases run, which we'll see in a little bit, you can actually see what's happening. Should return null. So we go with a var contact equals, let's do contact manager equals new contact manager, and I don't want test, I want manager. And then if I hit the option period, option enter, can reference the contacts logic and use the manager. Probably going to want to reference a domain too. So let's go and do that in a second. So I'm going to do var contact equals contact manager dot get, hey, oh, lowercase contact manager Joe dot get contact And then let's pass it in a -1. So we know -1 is not a valid ID. The valid IDs in ours start with 1 and up. So now we tell it what we want it to do. So here we are going to say assert, which you are saying, actually I should probably, let me do this and then we'll go back to how you arrange unit tests, which I totally forgot. So let's do assert, and then what are we going to check for? In this case, you want to make sure it's null. So we're going to choose assert null and then contact. So this says, after you run on line 11, we're going to create an instance of the contact manager. Line 12 says we are going to try and get a contact with the ID of -1. And then line 14 says, tell me if that's null or not. This is typically called the 3 A's. Arrange. So I'm setting up the code or setting up the test. And this could have more than one item. And then the act, the actual test I'm doing. And then the assert. Now you don't typically need to have the comments here. I typically do that just to get in the habit of setting them up. Each individual unit test should test one function. Some people will test multiple things inside of one function, but right now all of our functions are super tight. So, and what I mean by super tight is they have really one responsibility. So we are only going to validate that one responsibility. The other thing we wanted to test is I actually get a contact back with it. Should return contact with this should be invalid ID. Now here we are going to pass in 1. Now here, I don't want it to say no. Let's see what our other options are. Dot, not null. Here it goes. Not null. And then if we run these tests, we should see everything passing if I coded it correctly. So, Master Pascal, did you figure out more what you need than a billing calculator? It's pretty generic. I don't know if there's much I can help you with that. Let's see what the instructions are for testing with JetBrains Writer. So we already edited it, edit test, set it to xUnit, rewrote our test, then we hit run all. So let's go back here. Notice these little green play buttons. I can run an individual test, any one of them, or if I come up here, I can run all the tests, debug all the tests. I'll cover all and profile all in another stream. So let's do run all just to make sure everything worked. While this is running, it should be compiling the application. If I look at our build screen, it's executing, essentially compiling everything. Then it's going to build up the test DLL. Then the test runner, which is built into JetBrains Writer, will kind of attach itself to the DLL and get the output of it to let you know whether or not your test passed. So let's give it a minute or two. All the tests built. Now the unit is running, and I'm going to, my face should be fine for right now. See, it found 2 tests in here. One test called get contact with a valid ID should return contact. and another test, get contact with blah, blah, blah. Notice there are also question marks. They haven't been run yet. Now they're hourglasses, meaning that it's getting ready to run. Once it's running, they'll turn to an icon. It should be really quick. First test is going to be a little slow because we're actually testing against the database. So as we see, it should be running return null is running. It's going to open up the database, run, come back. That one passed, but our other one failed. If we look at our other one, we get a dash or a big do not enter sign, says it's failed. This one is a pass. Overall, I get one test failed. Here I see two tests, one pass, one failed. If I look at the results of the failed one, it says assert not null failed in line 31. So contact came back as a null. Why did contact come back as null? Because I passed in an invalid ID. If I remember correctly, this should be from 1 and up. Now, normally you don't create unit tests that actually go and interact with a database, but we haven't built our application in such a way that allows us the ability to not do that. So once we get through some of the unit tests, you'll see ways that we are going to fake the actual call to the database as well as fake other testing. So here I should be using a contact ID of 1. So let me do that. And I am going to rerun this test. If I wasn't sure what was wrong, I could go back and debug the test, but in this particular case, I knew exactly what was wrong. I passed in an invalid ID. Now, if I'm running, you notice that the do not enter sign has a little question mark on it. There's a little blue dot is actually a question mark. It's kind of small. It's because it's trying to rerun it now, and it doesn't know what the answer is. And it's still running because you can tell with this little bar going here. Red bar went to green because every test in here so far has passed. Now it's only running this one. Didn't bother running the other tests. It's only going to run this one because I just ran it locally through here. This runs successfully. Again, it's first time opening database. It passed successfully. So we're doing good so far. You can also test straight from the command line. So let me go to the context.test, or is it context.logic.test folder. Logic.test. Now if I do a .NET, I think it's test, it's going to run through all the tests that are in this test project. So essentially it's going to do the same thing that Writer did before. The only difference is Writer provides a user interface to it, so you can see green, red, or green check boxes and red do not enter signs for failed test. Because this is all text-based, it's just going to output some text with different colors. Wow, it's taking a long time to execute. I wonder if I got the right command. Let's go back to here and see. Yep, .NET test. I have the right command. Did I not hit enter? did that last week. I was playing around and I moved the mouse away and came back there. It goes, wow, it took a long time. I know why it took a long time. It was building everything in the background and it just didn't show me the output. That's why we just got a flashing cursor. Now it found one test file in there, which should be our contact manager test. It's going to go through and find the 2 different tests that are in there and execute them, and both of them passed. Let's see what happens if I change this to 0. Actually, let's not do that. Let's go and do some additional tests. So you don't only have to test one thing. You can test more than one thing, as long as it's kind of related. Typically, like for get, I wouldn't really validate that the data is coming back with the correct data. That's more called an integration test than a unit test. For a unit test, you want to validate a single unit of work, which is typically translates to a method. So we've validated the get contacts. We could create a test for get contacts plural to return it, as well as our search, but I'm going to skip over that for now and do the save contacts. Now, if you were with our stream before on Monday, you would have noticed when I ran our save contact console app, I ended up forgetting that the email address was required. So the first round failed. We're going to create a unit test to validate that all these are there. So I am going to minimize you guys here, and I am going to put you next window over, split vertically, just so I can see the text. So let's create a new fact, and it's going to be a public void save contact with invalid properties should throw exception. Now, depending on your shop, you might have 2 different ways to do this. I'm going to take the easier way by testing out all the validations in one method. Some people would argue that you should create one method for each of these and then pass in an object and make sure everything is good. Actually, let's do the first check and then we can do invalid properties. So I'm going to create a separate one. This one is going to make sure that we at least have the null checking work. Null contact. So let's do the act, and we are going to do contact manager dot save contact null, and then assert we should never get here. Now with NUnit throws the exception, and you give the method an attribute to expect the exception. I don't know what to do with the xUnit, so I'm going to take a quick look-see to see how we test with that. And I didn't see anything on here. Migration. These are more all the integrations. I have a different doc here for, oh, that's mock, wrong thing. xUnit, exception. Oh. How fitting that Hades the first point. He's actually one of the developer evangelists, managers, leaders at JetBrains, the makers of Rider. Let's see what he has to say. Wow, it's 2008. So he is saying in many cases works if you're throwing a custom exception, chance same exception thrown in your code. Framework throws the exception, try back. The guys at designed xUnit understood shortcomings of testing exceptions and took a cleaner approach. Exception equals except cert throws. Oh. Okay, let's see how that works. So let's go here. And what was it? Cert exception equals assert dot throws. So exception equals ex equals assert dot throws, and then the type we want, I believe I put in argument null exception. Yes, argument null exception, argument null exception, and then it wants a lambda for, yep. So let's do that. And now we can't see it because the screen went over. So let's kind of move that bad boy. And then one more and we should be good. So now we're going to get an exception back. We know we want to get an exception, so we're acting on it. Now we are going to validate that exception. So let's do an assert dot equals, and we are going to say ex dot message, and then it should equal what do, oops, sorry, what do we call it? Contact is required. So if we wrote this correctly, we should be good. And why are you blue? Swap arguments. Yes. I had the arguments wrong. So smart. So we're expecting it to say contact is a required field and EX message. I'm guessing if it throws a different exception that will fail, but we'll try that out afterwards. So let's go back to my unit test runner, window 8. And if I run them all, which is this button here, or this button, should execute those additional tests. So you notice it was smart enough. It did some reflection and found that there were 4 tests in there now. One of them is different because we actually changed the signature when I said I was gonna try something. Even though the method itself didn't change, I dirtied up that method so it's unsure of whether or not it ran successfully. Ooh, I forgot my tweeting. Hopefully people got the email at least and joined. I gotta figure out this webcam distance. If I move too close, I lose part of my forehead. And one of our tests failed. The should throw exception failed. Why did it fail? Oh, because the text is wrong. So this should say that. Now if I run it, I'm just going to run this one test. The argument null exception kind of puts together one text. If I did not cast the assert.throws into an exception and into the argument null exception, which we'll do next, it'll be a lot clearer as to the intent of what I wanted. Come on, run, run, run. So slow. In the meantime, let's go and start messing around with this one. We are going to create a new contact. Var contact equals new contact. No, just a new contact. I don't want contact manager. Now it should have added the domain up top, contacts.domain, which it did. And now we are going to run the act, which is contact manager dot save contact, pass in the contact, and then we want to assert, and I believe this returns an integer if it's or true or false. So let's do assert dot is true, or is not as true. What is it? Assert true. And then I forgot a result. Let's do var was saved equals was saved. And now we're good. So we're going to come back to this in a second, and let's see a way to kind of clean this bad boy up a little bit. So I am going to make this a argument null exception, and that gives me a little bit different properties. So here, if I do exception dot, I should be able to see, nothing else. Is it not assert.throws? Yeah, I should be able to see more than just the message. Sort. Oh, there it is. Parameter name. So let's make sure that this equals contact. And then assert.equal. And this one should say whatever this text is up here, which is saves, which should be this text. And ex dot, I want to say message, but let's see. Because those are the only two parameters we set. If I run this, we should be good. I'm just going to run this one. I'm not going to run the second one because we made some modifications to it. So let's do a run. And if we got everything okay, both of these should pass. And this is a little more concrete as far as validating everything we could for that save contact when the null is passed in or the contact that's passed in is null. Come on, stop pending, stop pending. Ooh, it failed. Oh, because the message is still the full entire message. Okay. The other thing I could do is just do string dot starts with, but this is what actually is going to be returned, so we want to make sure it matches. So now if we run this test, this should actually fail because this is going to throw an exception. Let's just double check that by running it. Waiting for it to execute. Once it executes, we should get a failure because that method threw an exception. Yep, we get a first name is required field, so we'll never get here. And this is actually not a valid assertion, so I don't want to put this one in here right now. And let's get back to this one. So we are creating a these are all argument null exceptions. So let's try these things. If we do them one at a time, can't really do them one at a time. Well, you could, but that's going to take a lot of time. Well, let's just do that. So I am going to get rid of this, and then we'll go back to invalid, or with, let's call this null first name. And then I want to copy this text out, only because we're going to keep reusing this over and over again. And then, come on, computer, catch up. That, and then that equals contact. Actually, you know what I think I'll do? Let's move you back. Move to opposite group. And then let's do a split screen horizontal. This way you can kind of see both. So here we are going to do the save, and let's work on the first name. And remove this. Add in the extra. And then let's just copy this code. Change it. This should be first name. And first name and first name. Now this is going to fail. There you go. That should be fine. Now let's run this one. If I run this, we'll copy and paste for the other three. And just do it for a last name and email address. I can see why some people play music in their streams, so that kills that awkward silence as the machine is building and executing the code. Or you just get a really fast machine so you're not waiting for seconds for it to come back. Now normally you would write all these tests, run all the tests at once, and then, you know, fix any problems. This particular case, I'm kind of walking through the steps one by one. What failed here? Expected, actual. What line failed? Line 63, which is this line because I deleted something. Oh, missing that. So that should be good now. Let's make sure so I don't have to run it multiple times. Click run. I wonder why the contact passed. Contact shouldn't have passed. Name of. Interesting. I have to validate that the contact one actually, or the null still works, because I cut out that part. Come on, come on, come on, come on, come on, come on. Yay, it worked. Yeah, this one should have failed too, so let's go and do that. Now that these are working, I want to do let's do last name and email address right now. So let's copy you. with null last name, change you to last name, change you to last, change you to last. Thank you. Spelling error caught me. Now this will still fail on first name, so here I have to give the contact first name something, and first name is equal to Joseph. Now the first name is going to be populated, but the last name and all the others aren't, so it should fail at this point. With email address, we want to do everything else the same, but we are going to have to populate the last name. So let's do contact that last name equal to Guadagno. Throws new argument. This should be, I believe it's called email address. This will be what I call lowercase email here. No, uppercase. Email address is required. Parameter name, email address. So now if I run all the tests now, should see them all passing. And this is good because now if we go and change any of the logic, which I'm going to do in a second, we should see whether or not our application should run correctly. And what I mean by should run correctly is that there are no side effects of making the changes that we made. And to give you a little teaser what we're doing, you see here in email address, I did proper casing, whereas for last name and first name, I did Pascal casing, which is a lower letter for the first part of the word and upper for the last part. So to be consistent, this should actually be a capital L with a capital N. So we'll go and fix that. Good. All of our tests pass. So let's say another engineer comes by and says, oh, I don't like this inconsistency. Here I have email address, all caps. Here I have it lowercase. So let me fix that. Oh, he did the same thing with first name. So let me fix that. And he did the same thing with contact. So I went and made those changes. As an engineer, I can go back and say, let me run the test. Now I should have 3 of my tests failing. Because the equals is case sensitive, and it's going to notice that those 3 or 4 are null. And I also notice that this should be address, so I'm changing that. And these all failed, as we would expect, because the parameter names are different. So we'd have to update our unit test, which is a good reminder to go back to your code base and see what changes might be required if you make a simple little change like the case sensitivity of that. And I think I changed you contact and then contact. Let's save. run them all to make sure all of our tests are working. If they are all working, I think that's, oh no, we got one more test to write and then we'll call it a stream. I want to write one more test for the date time validation. Test running. Dun, dun, dun. Well, some people might say that, oh, I got the contact one wrong. What did I get wrong in the contact? Parameter name, contact. Oh, yeah. That's because Visual C# controls that text. So this actually has to be lowercase because the parameter is being passed in as lowercase. It was my bad. Okay, so if we go through here, email address, next thing to do is validate that the birth date validations will fail. So let's go, I'm gonna move you down a bit. Actually, let's just hide you for a minute to give me more room. Let's do these date validations. Working with dates is always a pain. I was watching one of the videos or one of the things from the Dev Under the Sun, one of the presentations, timey-wimey things. If you're a Doctor Who fan, you get the reference. It talked about all the differences between date times and days of the week and everything, and it really blew my mind. I was amazed how many differences there were in whether a date starts with 0 or what the first month of the year is. So many things have changed over the history of time. So let's do save contact with future with birthday in future. This one should throw an exception. So let's do here contact.email address equals jguadagno@hotmail.com, and the birthday, it should throw a argument out of range exception. Argument out of range exception. Change you to argument out of range exception. And that means we get different parameters. So in our EX, we are going to get a actual value because I believe we populated the actual value. And then let's just do a temporary variable here. Var feature date equals date time dot equals new date time. And let's do 2030. 12:31 at 23:59 and 59 seconds. So we are going to set my birthday equal to future date. This should return a future date And then we should get, oops, let's copy this text out. We should get the message of that. Okay, so we created a new contact that has a first name, last name, email address, and we're giving it a birthday to make sure that the birthday is not in the future. If it is in the future, this will come up and throw the exception. So let's go and run you. If it runs and works on the first time, that is awesome. And then the more complicated one is we'd want to build a test case for this one and a test case for this one. And then after that, validate the actual save works. Which, if this one works with the current time, might still do. My daughter's not home from work yet, so my unit test come up yet? Still running. Yay, it's starting. Pending, pending, pending. Let's go. Let's finish. Now it's running. Ah, it's a long message. Ugh, that's dirty. Should try a different message, otherwise we're gonna have to debug this and see what the actual test is. I only really want this portion of it, so let's see what I can get out of that. Exception dot. You got the parameter name, data, inner exception. Well, I should check the parameter name while we're at it, like we did with everything else. So let's do that. Call this birthday. Really don't want that whole message. That's a lot of extra stuff. Let's just do ex.message dot starts with. This is a little dirty, but I don't need to know that how .NET formats the message. I really just want to make sure it contains this birthday cannot be null. What is ReSharper suggesting? Use assert starts with. God, this thing is so smart. Kills me. There it goes. So that's a little bit cleaner. Now if I run this, assuming I did everything right this time around, actually I'm going to run them all so I can just get them all green again. Excuse me. Now our birthday one should be working, and I got all the syntax right. We can add the 2 different date ones and then be fine. I'll probably just add this one, and then the other 2 I'll add to the source before I commit it. Come on, run, 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 run. L1 pending. Successes. Come on, birthday. Come on, valid ID. Everything's success. Cool. It worked out, and I got a little notification that it was running. That's because I shifted focus away from the screen onto a different screen. Let's add the last test, and then we should be good to go. What does this one say? Let's copy and paste all this. Let's do with, first one is anniversary in the future. So we got contact.birthday equals new, let's just do today, equals date time dot now, or date time dot now dot add, add days -1. So essentially born yesterday. Or technically what we could probably do is, since we got the future date here, anniversary can't be date time, birthday, yeah, we want birthday to be today, so let's do date time dot now, and then say add -1 day to it, so essentially yesterday, just to make sure. Why are you complaining? Why are you complaining? Oh, it's a time span. Oh, it's because I did add days. That's what I want. And now we're going to do contact.anniversary equals future date. Now this should fail. So let's do anniversary. That should be the same. And this should be the same, anniversary. And thank you for catching my poor spelling. Now if I write, we're going and taking the birthday just to make sure it's not today and less than 1 day, and the anniversary is in the future. That's the more important thing. This should fail. And then we do one more test, which is the second one, to make sure that the anniversary is not earlier than the birthday. That's a slightly easier test. We don't need the future date anymore. So we have the birthday could just be datetime.now, and then the anniversary is datetime.now yesterday. And contact.birthday, only because I don't feel like creating another variable now. Oop, this is contact.anniversary. And then let's change the message to this. Voila. Why am I getting red? I got red somewhere. Oh, with anniversary before birthday. Now if I run this and go to my unit test, run them all of them should be working at this point. Then there would only be really one more need for unit tests for the save to actually make sure that we save the record. And that would give us close to, if not 100% code coverage for that one method. And we can talk about code coverage a little bit more in the next stream. So let's hope all our tests pass. All a pass. Look at that. I got that one right on the first shot. Cool. Let's put you back up here. Move to opposite group. And we should really be done with the basics for unit tests. We look at our contact manager. We tested what are called all the negative scenarios. So these 3 rules for business validation, these 4 rules for data validation have all passed. The only remaining one is whether or not this save works. So that's all we got for this stream. Any questions on the content, feel free to reach out to my email address or me at one of these following ways. Post an issue on the Git repo for this if you want. Source code will be up there shortly. Have a great day.